Carol Ann Duffy's poem Medusa is just incredible. She takes this famous Greek myth we all think we know and completely flips it on its head. This isn't some ancient story about gods and curses. No, this is a raw, modern look at a toxic relationship and the truly destructive power of jealousy. So today, we're going to break down how very human pain can create a monster.
And right at the heart of it, the poem asks this really terrifying question. What happens when love goes so wrong that it actually becomes a weapon? That's the core of what we're exploring here.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty here. The Medusa from the classic myths, right? She was punished by the goddess Athena, a victim of some squabble between the gods. But Duffy's Medusa? Totally different story. Her curse doesn't come from on high. It grows from within, sparked by the very human pain of being betrayed by her partner. This is a monster born from a modern conflict. So, you gotta wonder, how does something like this even start? Well, it all begins in the mind. The first stage of this whole horrifying story isn't about snakes or stone, it's about the poison of a single emotion. The poem kicks off with this really powerful trio: a suspicion, a doubt, a jealousy. And notice, these aren't just passing thoughts. The poem says they grew in her mind, almost like a cancer. This, right here, is the seed of her entire psychological breakdown. And check out the clever trick Duffy pulls with the language here. It's a technique called a syndeton. By just leaving out the word and, she makes the line feel rushed, breathless, almost frantic. It's brilliant, because that rhythm makes you feel her spiraling, chaotic thoughts.
And this is where it gets really chilling, because those internal poisonous thoughts, they start to become real. The snakes we all know and expect aren't just snakes. They're a direct metaphor for her own venomous feelings. It's like her thoughts themselves have become so full of hate that they are literally, physically, hissing and spitting right on her head.
And just listen to the sound of those words, hissed and spat, that S sound over and over again. It's called sibilance, and it's no accident. She's making the words themselves sound like a snake. The line itself feels spiteful, just dripping with this venomous rage. Okay, so the monster has been born inside her head. What happens next? Well, now that internal rage starts to spill out into the real world, and this is where we see her destructive power really start to ramp up. Now, at first, this power isn't something she controls at all. It's just leaking out of her. Her deadly gaze isn't a conscious choice. It's an accidental side effect of her pain. This first example tells you everything you need to know. The key word here is glanced. That's not intentional, right? It's just a fleeting look. She's not even trying to cause harm. But her pain is so potent that even that simple glance turns a living, vibrant, buzzing bee into a dead, dull gray pebble. But then something changes. You can feel the shift in the poem. As that bitterness just festers inside her, she goes from being a passive victim of her own power to an active wielder of it. Her gaze becomes her weapon. And bam, here it is. The word changes from glanced to looked. That's not passive anymore, is it? That's focused, it's intentional, and the destruction is so much more violent too. The word shattered just makes the brutality of it so clear. So you can literally track her descent by the words she uses. It's this chilling progression. She goes from an accidental glance that kills bees to a deliberate look that destroys bigger animals like cats, and finally to a fully empowered stare where she's confronting dragons. At the peak of this power, when she stares down a dragon, it turns into just one thing: a volcano. Think about that for a second. It's this massive metaphor for her own rage, right? No longer scattered and chaotic, but focused into this single, erupting, absolutely unstoppable force of nature. All right, so she's fully embraced this monstrous power. She's at her peak. And now the poem turns, and she finally confronts the person who started it all, her lover. And you can see just how much her view of him has shattered. She used to see him as a perfect man, Greek god, just flawless. But now, with her monstrous clarity, she sees the ugly truth. She sees he had a shield for a heart, that he was always emotionally closed off, and worse, a sword for a tongue, meaning his words were just cruel weapons that cut her deep. And then,
We get the raw, painful truth behind all of it in just 4 devastating words. The bitter way she repeats, your girls, it confirms it. His cheating, his infidelity, that was the final betrayal that unleashed this whole nightmare. But even with all this rage and power, there's this heartbreaking moment of vulnerability. She asks these questions. Wasn't I beautiful? Wasn't I fragrant and young? It shows that a part of her is still blaming herself, wondering if she wasn't enough. It's a glimpse of the wounded person still trapped inside the monster.
And that all leads us to the final, chilling climax of the poem. It's all wrapped up in a single line that's so tense and so ambiguous. Is this a desperate plea? Or is it the ultimate threat?
Just 3 words. Look at me now. That's it. And it is so, so powerful because it can mean 2 completely opposite things. And this is where the genius of the poem really shines. On one hand, you could read this as a desperate plea, a cry for him to truly see her, to look at the monster he created and finally acknowledge her pain. But on the other hand, it's a deadly threat, a cold, menacing command, daring him to look at her and face his punishment, to be turned to stone. It's a moment of total vulnerability and ultimate power, all at the same time. So that leaves us right back where we started with this huge question. After everything she's become, after everything she's done, what is she? Is she a monster or is she a victim? And in the end, I think the real power of this poem is that it doesn't give us an easy answer. It shows us that sometimes, when the emotional pain is deep enough, the line between victim and villain doesn't just get blurry, it gets erased completely. It shows us that sometimes the victim is the monster. They can be one and the same.